It strikes me as odd to publicize a counteroffensive, to publicize almost anything in war in terms of strategy or timing, but nonetheless, Zelensky gave a extended interview to the Wall Street Journal in which he previewed a counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are prepared to launch against the Russians, saying that we strongly believe that we will succeed. I don't know how, excuse me, I don't know how long it will take. To be honest, it can go a variety of ways, completely different, but we're going to do it and we're ready. And I know Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff there, General Milley, took time from reading Ibram Kendi's latest work to opine on this as well and saying that, oh, yeah, we're very confident it's going to be successful. But the Wall Street Journal saying, writing, this is opinion, or analysis, if you will. Ukrainians' Western backers recognize that Kyiv's own offensive won't end the war, but want to demonstrate to Putin the futility of his strategy of digging in and waiting for support for Ukraine to erode, according to a Western official, unnamed, of course. So tempering expectations. So just exactly what is the state of play there? What are the prospects for this telegraphed counteroffensive? And if it doesn't go well, if it does go sideways, as Zelensky sort of intimated it could, then how long do you suspect that public opinion will continue to support drop shipping money and weapons into Ukraine? For more on all this, please be joined by Dakota Wood, who served America for 2 decades in the Marine Corps, is the Senior Research Fellow for Defense Programs at the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A real pleasure to be with you. You know, we had a sonic boom over D.C. This weekend. I thought maybe it was residual from the Taylor Swift concert.
Hi-oh. Yeah.
On that, or?
Yeah. No, that was tragic with that Cessna crash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the Cessna was, it's real bad. But it does show some of the responsiveness of the Air Force fighters in this area. So
well, it's good that they weren't otherwise occupied at a drag queen show. So that was
my gosh.
Glad to hear that. Yeah. So what about this counteroffensive that's being detailed in the press?
You know, it's one of those public relations things, I think, on the part of Zelensky. He's quite aware that the only way Ukraine can continue its war effort is with sustained support from the United States and all the other countries that have given munitions. So, I mean, for a couple of months now, people have been talking about this counteroffensive, how to push back on Russia, how do you reclaim your borders? And he can't stay silent, the whole time, because then, what's going on? I mean, how do we answer questions like yours and all that? So he's walking this line of not saying, okay, 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, we're going to launch this thing. And yet he has to say something. So it's part of this propaganda in the positive sense, public relations, maintaining support effort that he has to undertake while not promising the moon. So you kind of want to underplay it, but you can't be so down in the mouth and kind of negative that people throw up their hands and say, well, why are we doing anything?
Well,
right?
so
what kind of in a no-win situation.
Well, what is the reality on the ground? What do you expect from this counteroffensive?
Well, I think it's stalemate right at the moment. I mean, where Russia has pushed in, they have established a trench network like World War I. I mean, so you're talking heavily fortified defensive positions. The history of warfare means that the offense has a dramatically more difficult time to push through prepared defenses. Usually the ratio is like 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 offense to defense in terms of firepower and stuff. So the Ukrainians will have to make very careful selections on where they want to penetrate the Russian line, probably down toward this area called the land bridge, where Russia has seized Ukrainian terrain that allows Russia to connect Russia proper to the Black Sea coastline. And that way they can move stuff back and forth and reinforce things. If the Ukrainians go on too many points of entry, they dilute their offensive firepower. They don't achieve the local overmatch in their force against the Russian defenders. So, perhaps in the next couple of weeks, this is all very speculative, but it'll have to be focused, probably supported by some artillery fires or drone strikes in other areas to get some kind of temporary surprise But only the Ukrainians know exactly what they're going to do, and I think it'll have limited success unless the Russians cut and run. But it's how much power has Ukraine been able to build up over the past couple of months that translates into sustained offensive effort at one or 2 points of attack.
Now, so far since the war began, the Biden administration and Congress has given Ukraine $75 billion. Do you think we should keep funding this war?
Yes and no. I think on the military side, yes. That's more like around $45 billion. The other numbers are humanitarian support to their government to keep running, those sorts of things. So other countries could be providing more of the humanitarian support funding. I think helping with the military component, the equipment and the ammunition piece is not just entirely appropriate, it's really needed. Because if Russia gets a win on this, we wish the war had never started to begin with, right? But now we're in it. If Russia gets a win, it just whets Putin's appetite to do more, and you see what Iran is doing with its nuclear program, supporting Hezbollah and Hamas and all these strikes against Israel, and what China is doing, and its very provocative actions in the Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, close encounters. So everybody is kind of watching this test case in Ukraine to see how the West, responds, and whether we have a willingness to sustain the support.
Well, what does Ukraine have in terms of the weapons that were committed to them, from the Abrams tanks to the air support? I mean, Zelensky saying in this Wall Street Journal interview that Russia has air superiority on the front lines, and that means a large number of soldiers will die. That's quotation from him in the counteroffensive. And so if we're in, then are we going to be in, or we're going to continue to be half in? And if we're half in, then what are we looking? Then what are we doing? You're either in or you're not. I'm not saying ground troops, but I mean in terms of are we giving him and the Ukrainians the resources they need to affect a military victory or not?
No, we're not. That's that half-in point. I mean, what Biden's team has done is always waited weeks or months past the point of the request. And when we do give stuff, it takes weeks or months for the stuff to get on the battlefield. And it's only just enough to help the Ukrainians to keep from losing, but not enough to win. I mean, we've seen over a year, 15, 16 months of this timidity from the Biden administration. And their claim is we don't want to escalate. Well, you've got an entire country being destroyed. I mean, we have
escalated. So I mean, what does that even mean? What in your estimation? I don't know if there's a specific number or specific weapon systems, but what would it take to give Ukraine, in your estimation, what it needs to repel the Russians?
Well, it's more of what we have already been giving. So instead of 31 Abrams main battle tanks that won't show up until next fall, why wasn't it 200? I mean, we've got 6,000 in our inventory, right? So, yes, they're complicated. Yes, it takes parts and maintainers to do that stuff. But this country is at war. I mean, you figure out ways to make things work, right? The timidity from Germany and from the United Kingdom, their offerings have revealed how little our NATO allies actually have in usable gear. Of Germany's 300 tanks that they've got, something like 100 are only operationally available, right? So it's revealing the shortfalls in the Western inventory. But in spite of that, anti-platform weapons like an anti-air missile or an anti-tank missile, absolutely needed for defensive purposes and at the point of contact on offense. To go offensive, you need mobile protected firepower like a tank. You need huge inventories of artillery munitions and short-range missiles, short-range ballistic sorts of things. So it's just more of what we have been given instead of just enough to keep from losing. So we don't need to put American troops on the ground, absolutely not. We don't need to give them F-35s. I think F-16 aircraft have very, very limited utility. A colleague of mine, J.B. Venable, has written extensively on this about why that would be a bad move. but the Ukrainians have got to have an ability to take the fight to the Russians. And so this half-stepping has really left them in a precarious situation.
You mentioned Chinese communist provocations recently, both in the air and at sea. So what is that?
Well, you have these close intercepts. It used to happen all the time between Soviet and U.S. and NATO forces back in the Cold War. So it's really nothing new, but they have stepped up the level of intercepts. So when you have a Chinese fighter that crosses in front of an American surveillance aircraft in international airspace, the jet wake, from its engines creates turbulent air. It can cause all handling in the airplane. That's a dangerous sort of thing. And we've had times when their aircraft have clipped ours. If you remember the Hainan Island incident from many, many years ago, right, where it downed an airplane, we lost a lot of intel stuff with that aircraft. The ship incident here just yesterday, I guess, a Chinese ship crossed within about a football field, 150 yards in front of an American ship that was sailing with was a Canadian frigate, I believe, in the Taiwan Strait. Again, international waters, doing their thing. The Chinese want to make a point, and no ship captain is going to do that independently. So this is guidance from the Chinese Communist Party on down to do these provocations and create an incident, and then the Chinese will feign that they are a victim and the United States is a bad guy. So it's just been increasingly aggressive in these kinds of meeting engagements or intercepts where things can go bad, and then you've got a diplomatic incident, right? A crisis that spirals out of that.
And with respect to the Chi-Coms, connecting it back to Ukraine, is there any movement that we're detecting in terms of Chinese communist support for Russia in that fight with Ukraine?
No, there's been talk about support of munitions, artillery ammunition, for example, from China to Russia. I haven't seen hard evidence of that, but certainly energy sales, diplomatic support, tamping down Western support to Ukraine, to some extent, encouraging support for Russia, again, in trade relationships and energy. The Iranians have been feeding all kinds of unmanned systems, drones to Russia, and that has tacit support from China. So it's more of an indirect path, but it certainly keeps Putin viable and Russia's war effort viable.
He is Dakota Wood. He served America for 2 decades in the Marine Corps. He is the Senior Research Fellow for Defense Programs at the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
I'm Dave Nissen, CEO of PKF Mueller. As a CPA firm, we have been serving our business clients since 1968 by providing audit, accounting, tax, advisory, and consulting services. We, as trusted